Today I'm going to be going through somewhat of a guide on installing gauge pillars on the 2013 Genesis Coupe. I've got the gauge pillars from MSA, Motorsport Authorities, which are the actual direct fit to the Genesis because of the Kia Hyundai part number on the back. Let's see, where is it? Somewhere over here. Well, actually it's not going to come up on the camera because it's black, but regardless, this is the original part that has been machined and worked to fit two 52mm gauges. And I'm going to be installing the Evo Sport digital wideband O2 gauge and the boost gauge here. Now, further along in the video you'll see once it's all hooked up, it's not the needle analog style, it's actually, and it's not the digital series per se, but it's going to look real nice. So let's get started. The first thing I started on is building out the wire harness. Now the O2 and the boost sensor come with their own connectors that go into the back of the gauges. This thick one here is for the wideband O2. I'll explain this in just a minute. And these single looking wires that come into this connector is for the boost. Now what I ended up doing, and I'm not a master electrician, is we take the white and the red wire that comes out of the end of the O2 connector, and we put that together to make the power. And this is all in the instructions. And for the ground, built a little extension for the ground wire, and I use green because that's the closest thing to black that I have right now. And then what I did was take, where am I? The one for the boost controller, or rather the boost gauge, and the same principle, the white and the red right here, put them together and piggyback onto the red power lead cable, and take the black one here and piggyback onto your negative cable. And I attached at the end, which I'm about to attach underneath, and I'll show you that in a moment, where the ground is going to be. Now I found a really good spot, and hopefully you have the same spot for the manual, but I have an automatic, so I have this spot available, which I'll show you in just a moment. Alright, the next part here after you get your wire harness built is to take the pillar off. This is where the fun begins. So this clip right here will snap right off the SRS cover. So it would be in there. You just get your fingers in there, pull it out, and you'll see a Phillips head screwdriver in there. So once you unscrew it, you simply come, get your fingers underneath the rubber here for the weather strip, and just pull. And once you get that one snap out, simply pull up this way and out in this direction, and the whole piece will come out. Okay, so the next thing I did is ran the wires up through the pillar hole behind the dashboard in there and from underneath. Now the way I did it is the fish tape style, where you put in some kind of cable. I use the rubber hose, but you can use rope, and run it down in there. But once you find it underneath the dashboard, you tape your connectors, which the end of this and the end of this, you tape it up to the end of the hose that, or rope that came out from underneath, and then you start pulling backwards, and once you pull, your cables will nicely come out. Now I want to show you where the ground wire is that I used. So if you follow this green wire, make sure I'm zoomed out, yep. Now I found this little metal piece right here that I'm thinking is for the clutch sensor assembly, similar to the brake sensor right here for the pedal. And there's a bolt on from behind it on this side, where in the direction that I'm pointing. So remove the bolt and insert your cable end tip in between, sandwich it in between the metal and the plate right there, and then put the bolt back through it. And this will give you a very good connection, very solid ground connection. And so it'll just run off your wire harness for one sensor and the other, one gauge and the other gauge, and just tidy up the wires a little bit. But I just wanted to show that that's where I used the ground connection. So next I'm going to attach the actual gauges. I have them right now hanging for the time being just to test the power. Actually, let me go over the power while I'm on the subject. So for the positive lead, I am using this one up here. Now that one is the power outlet, and it's naturally a 15 amp fuse. So what I did is we continue to use the 15 amp fuse here, and the one, so as you're looking at it, the original circuit is going to be in the front, and then behind it is going to be your circuit. Now on my circuit I'm using 10 amps maximum because these gauges really don't pull much amperage. And you keep the 15 and plug it into that location right there. Very solid fit. And so that's really how it looks like. Now this other added circuit, that's from my other video when I did the installation for my Genesis LEDs. So just ignore that. That doesn't have anything to do with the gauges. So now my next step is going to be to actually put the gauges into the pod, and we're going to mount the pod to the pillar. Okay, the next fun part would be to run the wires through the firewall of the you know, under the hood for these both sensors. You've got the O2 wideband and you've got the boost sensor signal that needs to be ran through. Now, in order to get there, the best way to do it is to remove, there's a bolt right there, a bolt right here, and there's going to be a bolt in the middle, and that will hold your ECU and TCU bracket together, and ECU only if you have a manual. And of course you disconnect. These are the 3 prongs because I have an automatic. This is the second and this is the third. And unbolt it, or unattach it rather, and disconnect and remove the entire ECU module and just set it safely over to the side. The next thing is you take out this one bolt over to the side that holds these 2 relays right here. They're sitting right there. There's a bolt that goes right there that you unbolt, and these are all 10mm bolts, all 4 of these. Take that bolt out and just move these 2 over to the side. Don't disconnect it. And the key is to run the wires through the hood latch grommet where I'm pointing to. Now the way I did it was grab a hold of the grommet perimeter and just pull with needle nose pliers. Just pull and just work its way, and the entire rubber piece about this long will come out. And so bring it to about right here. And what I did in order to fit this thick wire with a huge rectangular head is to use an X-Acto knife, which here it is. You know, some kind of a blade apparatus, and you slice the grommet exactly down its length so that it would open up as a sandwich. Once you have it opened up, you lay down the signal wire for the boost and the thick black wire for the O2. And once you rewrap the grommet around it, because it has a extended sleeve, you push it back into there and keep pushing until you get a good solid snap, like a rubber snap, where the seal is complete. Now the seal is on the head of the grommet on the larger perimeter, whereas on the smaller perimeter under the dash where I'm about to show you, doesn't really matter. So once you have it sealed in there, the thickness of all 3 of these, the hood latch, the boost signal wire, and the O2 wire, the thickness of all this will ensure a proper seal so that there's no problem, and you won't have any kind of air or water leak. Now let me show you under the hood. So as you can see under the hood, right here, you have the sleeve sticking out. Now I'm gonna work on it a little bit just to get the wires to come through that hole a little bit better, but it's really not as important because the seal has already been established from the other side on the metal. So you'll have your two wires that you are needing, one for the boost signal and the other for the O2, to hook them up into their proper place. Now the boost signal is going to tie in to the provided green wire that comes from the back of the gauge. So that's where your boost signal will go, and this is in the instruction when you buy your gauge. And the thick black wire will go into the O2 brain, which I don't have. Oh yeah, actually I do have it right here. So your O2 brain right here, it will go into the sensor port right on this where my thumb is. It's not focusing in very well, but that's where it's going to plug in. And then you can just hide this O2 brain down into the kick panel, just into there, just to kind of get it out of the way, and it won't have any adverse effects or have any wires hanging out. So I'm going to go ahead and continue connecting these so that I can finally get to the point where I'm going to mount the pillar, mount the gauge pod onto the pillar. So stay tuned. Okay, so after running the cables, as I've shown you from underneath, you have to be patient and get your cables. The way I did was, when you have the pillar in your hand, before you insert the gauges in, run the cables through so that they come out each hole. And once you have that, as it's sticking, go ahead and caress the cables underneath in this location where the big white connector for the airbag is going to be. Try to run some of the wires as much underneath the cable as possible, but if some get on its side, it's not a big deal, it'll still fit. So once you have your cables coming out of the two holes, go ahead and mount the pillar, slide it inwards. First go in at that angle and then push forward, and it will slide in. You'll get the feel of it when you try. And then you simply just apply pressure in this direction up here so that it can clip, and then slide your gauges into place and level them so that they're comfortable. Once you have all that, you can go ahead and put in your Phillips screw into this hole and put the SRS cap, but I'll get to that in a moment. And just to give you all a little preview, I'll go ahead and just power on just so we get a preview of what the gauges look like. So very nice, they come up, but we're still not to the part where we hooked up the sensor, so that's going to come up next. Okay, under the hood now, and we needed to install the boost sensor. Boost sensor is right here. This is the module that comes with it. So what I did is I removed a bolt off of the map sensor and used it to mount, to sandwich the extension plastic piece and stick the bolt through it and tightened it. Now the thing that caught me by surprise that I did not pay attention to was that the sensor has its own little wire harness that needs signal, ground, and a positive lead. So I had to take some time to run another wire all the way back through the through the grommet for the hood release latch. And I piggybacked onto the power lead on the ATA circuit, which was already fused at 10 amps, so that it could be turned on when the key is on, turned off when the key is off. So I ran that wire, and I ran a ground, the green wire, you can see, into one of those loop style connectors that is bolted into the already built-in harness into the engine. So I just powered on just to see if I could get a signal, and I did get a reading of 0 bar, which is exactly what you're supposed to get when it's turned off. In addition to the electrical connector, I went ahead and ran a hose line, the vacuum boost line, and I'm going to zip tie it in a minute, but I went ahead and ran it all the way and teed into my blow-off valve. Now for the stock cars that don't have an aftermarket blow-off valve, I would more than likely tee off at a section on the intake manifold, either this hose, which this one would be directly connected, ignore the T-fitting. So by stock, this line would run directly to this port. So you could tee off this, or you could tee off this line right here. But be sure that you get it in front of the one-way check valve so that you have boost and vacuum readings. If you get it on the back, you're only going to get one and not the other. So for the aftermarket blow-off valves, like I do with my HKS, I went ahead and just tapped into my blow-off actuating feed, and I'm going to zip tie at the heads and zip tie all along for cleanup, and I'm going to zip tie and, oh, I'm out of focus. I'm going to zip tie and clean up the electrical wiring so that it's not touching anything critical, and get that all cleaned up. Once that's done, I'll go ahead and install the ECUs. One thing I just thought of, the O2 sensor, so I'm sure you're wondering about that. Right now I don't have a O2 housing or a downpipe that has a bung for the O2 sensor. This is something that I'm waiting on GCP to develop, and I'll be purchasing one of those when it's ready and in production. In the meantime, what I ended up doing is I put a plastic over the oxygen sensor connector itself and taped it at the base so that if it rains, and if so happen that there's some water that drips down here, it won't make any short or contact. And then I looped the wire, as you can, there you go, as you can see, with a twist tie, and just let it sit there so it can get out of the way. So I'll be sure to secure that a little bit better as I go through the cleanup. But as for the time being, the O2 sensor is not going to be connected. So let me get back to tidying things up a bit, and I'll be right back. Okay, I've went ahead and zip tied and cleaned up and tightened up, and I think it's a job complete. So at the connectors here, you know, throughout, went ahead and put a very tight zip tie because I don't have hose clamps that can accommodate for all this. And I went ahead and loosely zip tied, you know, at sections like these all the way around, so I could run the vacuum hose cleanly around and all the way to the actual boost sensor. And then as far as the wires go, I went ahead and cleaned that up, and I'm sure there's a better method to doing all this, but this is my skill level, so I think it will last and it will work, and I support it, and that's what counts for me. And now I'll give you a shot underneath the dash. Oh, and I went ahead and reattached the ECU and everything. So let's go underneath the dashboard. And so you can see that I've tucked away the O2 brain behind this panel. You can just pop this tab out and give you a little bit of room this way, so you can stuff the cables and stuff the O2 brain, as I would call it. I don't know what the actual term is. And any spare wires, just kind of stuff in there. There's plenty of room, so when you come back out here, it looks very normal, very clean. Even if you look down, you're not going to see anything hanging. And then if you step back, you will see two gauge pods right there. And now for the test run. Okay, so now we're doing a test run. Let me see, because right now the air fuel is not connected, so we'll just stick with the boost. So I'm just cruising right now at about 45 miles an hour, so let me give it some gas and see how it works. And nothing to it. Works like it's to say a special thank you to my friend Acid Shock over here for helping me out through the install and his support. And there you go, all the Gen Coupe owners out there. Gauge pillar installation with the Prosport EVO Series gauges.